Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Rei-Lin bringing you another premium tank review. This time it's the Tier 3 Premium Artillery, the Abbot. If you don't want to listen to me prattle on about the statistics of this tank and my opinion on it, you can click at the top of your screen there and jump straight into the replay. Hope you enjoy it. For the rest of you, let's talk about this tank. It is artillery. And if you're coming from World of Tanks, this may not be that exciting for you. However, the Armored Warfare's version of artillery is a vast improvement over the artillery that is in World of Tanks. But let's go ahead and look at the stats anyway. Now, looking at our artillery in Armored Warfare, it doesn't seem like it's that impressive, just because of the way it's designed. Artillery in Armored Warfare are not considered to be your main damage dealers. They are a support tank. And I'll explain a little bit more about that here in just a minute. But looking at the damage per shell, 140 damage with 17 millimeters of penetration. That is because the only thing that artillery fire is high explosive. If it penetrates, though, it goes anywhere from 177 damage all the way up to 216. If you only splash them, you're only going to do 29 to 144. However, this particular artillery is an autoloader. It gets 3 shots per clip. And so you could look at the damage as saying, oh, around 600. Now, the likelihood is you're only going to do 3 to 400 if you're lucky, if you're hitting lightly armored vehicles. If you're hitting main battle tanks, you're probably not going to penetrate unless you get lucky and hit the rear end of the tank and take out the engine or something like that. Damage per minute is only 1,208. That's very, very low. You're not going to be coming in top of the damage list for the most part, no matter what artillery you play, although your damage does add up over time because of the way you can support your team. Hit points at Tier 3, 585 is pretty good. The Tier 4 artillery, both of them also only have 585, so you actually have a Tier 4 arty's health at Tier 3, which helps you survive. But if you look at the armor, 12, 10, and 10 on the hull, 12, 10, and 10 on the turret, you're 2 shots away from death. There's no bouncing shots unless you get just an extreme, weirdly angled autocannon shooting at you. They might bounce just a couple of shots, but more or less, if you get spotted, you're pretty much dead. The maximum speed of 46.8 kilometers an hour, nearly 47 kilometers an hour. It's not bad, but what is bad is the engine power here. 0 to 32. It's almost 11 seconds. This thing does not go anywhere very fast, unfortunately. And I'll explain why that is really bad for artillery in just a few minutes. The camouflage, though, is really good at 0.1 across the board. But with a view range of only 355 meters, most light tanks and AFVs are going to spot you before you spot them. The cannon depression is 5 degrees in the front, 7 degrees over the rear. This might allow you to get lucky up close and personal and derp somebody in the face that's below you or something like that. But because you only do about 140 damage, if you penetrate, the likelihood is, unless they're already near death, shooting shotgun style is not recommended in this tank. The turret traverse, as I mentioned, is very, very slow, along with the whole traverse. 12.22 degrees per second is terrible. The reload time, even though this is 15-second reload, remember you're loading 3 shots. You have 3 shells, and you get those 3 shells off in about 6 seconds or so. And that's not really that bad. The accuracy for artillery is extremely good at 0.11. The targeting time is 3 seconds, but considering this is artillery and the aim circle starts extremely large to begin with, a 3-second aim time is actually really good for artillery. The artillery in Armored Warfare works slightly different to World of Tanks. First off, the artillery here play a mini-game with each other. Every time you fire a shot, the enemy artillery on the other team gets a ping on the map of your rough location. If you fire again without moving, that ping becomes more of a zeroed-in blip. And if you fire a third time without moving, they will definitely see your exact position, even if you're hiding behind bushes or trees or cover of some kind. You render on the map for them so that they can see you physically for a couple of seconds after you fire. That, to me, is one of the biggest disadvantages of this tank besides the slow speed. The slow speed doesn't help because you're not going to be able to get the hell out of the way of counter battery fire unless you're in a position where they can't hit you to begin with. This thing is far too slow to avoid counter battery. If there's more than one artillery on the enemy team, and there can be at least two, if they zero in on you and fire all at once, you're dead. Even from another Abbot, 3 hits and you're probably going to die or can be completely wrecked with no health left. So that is one of the big disadvantages of this tank, and the fact that by the time you fired your third shot, you're already taking incoming counter battery fire, as opposed to the tier 4 artillery, which are single shots that do about 2 to 3 times your damage in one hit with about half the reload to compensate. However, one unique thing that artillery have, and it does get 4 smoke rounds. The smoke rounds you can drop anywhere that you can normally drop a normal HE round. You can use this to cover your light tanks or your main battle tanks if they're moving in a group. You can drop this on enemy tanks, and that will obscure them from view, but that also reduces their vision range by a great deal. It does only get 4. Most of the normal artillery get 8. At higher tiers, the artillery actually gets an illumination round. It's the opposite of a smoke round. It lights up anyone in the area for like 20 seconds or so. So you could drop that where you think maybe their scouts are sitting, or if you want to light up the artillery for your team, since you already know where they are if they fired, you can just make them permanently visible by dropping an illumination round. However, this tank doesn't get illumination rounds, unfortunately. So that is the statistics on this thing and why it's a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to artillery. But let's talk real quick here about the commanders and the crew. I go with Maximilian for all of my premium tanks just because I'm trying to grind out more and more experience and money and make my crew a little bit harder to kill. Even in artillery, it's nice to have your crew survive if they get hit by counter battery. If you don't have Maximilian, I suggest Juan Carlos or Freya. These two come off of the tier 4 artillery, so you're probably not going to have them when you first start off. So keep that in mind. If you have Maximilian, use him. Otherwise, if you're going to go down the artillery line, these are going to be the ones that generally make them as good as the artillery can get through their skills of doing more module damage or having better camouflage values. My crew, unfortunately, is not level 5, so I don't have both of my skills. However, what I do have here, spin to win. The hull traverse speed improved by 10%. The hull traverse speed on this tank is extremely slow. I'm saying somewhere around 10 degrees per second. It's terrible. It's worse than the turret traverse. This improves it by 10%. Every little bit's going to help. After that, I'm definitely going to take off-road driving to increase the acceleration of this tank on off-road terrain, which is almost everywhere in the game, by 10%. The gunner, I have quick draw to improve my aim speed that much more. It's already about 3 seconds or so. Might as well get it even lower. Keep in mind that since this is an autoloader, every time you fire, you get a bigger bloom on your aim circle. So if you improve your aim speed by a good deal, by the time the next shell actually loads, you'll be fully re-aimed, and that'll let you just fire your volleys as quickly as possible, hopefully avoiding counter battery fire. After that, you could go with shoot from the hip, which I might say is a good idea because that increases your minimum accuracy. That's when the aim circle is as big as it can get. That improves that circle size by 20%. So now your aim speed is going to help in conjunction with that because your circle won't be as large at the start, and it'll aim even faster. So that might be something to think about. Although this is an accurate artillery, you could go with marksman and improve your maximum accuracy by 20%, so it makes the circle even smaller once you've zeroed in on a target. This might be useful if you're trying to hit a specific part of a tank. You're not aiming necessarily for weak points, but you can aim for the rear engine decks, the tops of the turrets, the weakest parts of the armor. These things do get critical hits with their HE, and if you penetrate several shells in a row, you can completely destroy any kind of tank, their modules, and their crew. So that might be something to think about there. Rapid fire, reload time reduced by 5%. Get the reload time even lower so that you can whiz the shells as fast as you can. I would probably take explosive shells after that. To increase the module damage. HE does incredible amounts of module damage. This improves that by 20%. Since you are in artillery, crippling the enemy's tanks is one of your main jobs. You are a support tank more than a damage dealer. So explosive shells, I would definitely recommend that. You only get one type of shell. You get an HE shell. So load it up with all that you can carry, which is 50 shots, and you get 4 smoke rounds. So remember that although this is limited, it can be very useful for keeping your scouts safe from enemy fire. Consumables, as usual, I go with the better versions of the repair kit and the first aid kit. The spare parts to increase the repair speed as a passive effect by 10% of any of my modules. The energy drink, which improves my crew's attributes by 5% for one battle. And the medical kit, which improves passively the crew's resilience to damage by 15%. Combine that with Maximilian's extra health on my crew, and it becomes very, very hard to actually kill them, which is helpful, especially since your main adversary is going to be other artillery, and they do really well when it comes to killing your crew and your modules. Regardless of the tank you're in, I always suggest taking the low, mid, or high tier field maintenance kit. It instantly gives you back 20% of your health and gives you all of your ammunition back. Since this is an autoloader, you're firing 3-shot volleys at every reload. With the reload of 15 seconds, it's not that fast, but in a long match, you can get low on your shells, and getting the extra health back is also another positive. This will actually give you all your smoke rounds back as well. So that is something I would definitely suggest you go with for every tank. Retrofits. I went down the Russian line, so I have access to the experimental propellant Mark III, 7.5% damage increase. The damage on this thing isn't that great. None of the artillery generally have a lot of damage, but at the low tiers, the damage means a little bit more since you don't have illumination rounds. You only have 4 smoke rounds. The support role that you play at low tiers is nowhere close to as high of a priority as it is at the high tier. So you could put a mobility retrofit in there. You could put in the upgraded transmission, increase your acceleration. You could get the air induction pre-cleaner, gives you both acceleration and hull traverse speed. So you can make this thing a little bit faster, but the thing is it's already just so damn slow that even with upgrades like that, you're still going to be slow. So pick your poison with that. I went with the gyroscopic stabilizers. This also comes off of one of the tier 4 artilleries. It gives you a faster reload and aim time both together. So you're going to want to get this on all of your tanks if you have bad reload and bad aim times, but it's really good for pretty much any artillery, and you see that that's exactly where you get the Mark 1, 2, and 3 is all off of artillery. So if you're planning on using artillery, this is going to be an upgrade that you want to have. The braided Kevlar wiring, this is personal preference. This gives your crew skills nearly a 5% boost, and component saves means that when you get hit, there's less of a chance that any of your stuff actually goes kaput, including your modules and your crew. So that is actually something that you could switch out if you wanted to go with the intercom system and just do a flat crew skill boost. That might be something you think about, and but it's also personal preference when it comes to that. And that, in a nutshell, is the Abbot, the Tier 3 Premium Artillery. Do I think it's worth it? Honestly, for the price, and we're going to look real quick here, at 925 gold, which is going to run you about $5, because you're going to have to pay the lowest you can, 1,000 gold. I honestly, unless you are very, very interested in trying out the artillery, even though you're not going to have the right crew, the right commander, and the right retrofits to really bring out the best in this tank, unless you're desperate, I wouldn't get this tank. If you really want to try the artillery or you're a tank collector, fine, go for it. The problem I have, like I said, is that this thing is very slow, and it doesn't play exactly like the real artillery when you start getting them at Tier 4. It doesn't take that long to unlock the Tier 4 artillery, and both of those will give you a little bit better idea of how artillery is supposed to play. Now, none of them are necessarily that fast, but the Tier 4s, Even though they're slow, they're almost twice as fast as this thing in all regards, from turret traverse to hull traverse to top speed. Even reverse speed is better on those tanks than on this one. Their damage is also much higher, like I said, because both of the tier 4s are not autoloaders, they're single shots, and playing the little mini game with artillery becomes a little bit easier if you're only firing one shot and then moving. It doesn't light you up for as long and doesn't let them hone in as easily on your position. So you have more of a chance to survive late into the game when you're going to start mattering a little bit more with your smoke rounds or your illumination rounds if you're playing a high tier artillery. So while this does give you a slight taste of what artillery will play like as far as what the view looks like and the style of play, it is only $5, but there's no real reason to buy that premium artillery when you could just buy one of the tier 4s, and even when they're not fully upgraded, they still play similar to the higher tier artilleries than the Abbot does, in my opinion. I don't think it's a bad tank. I don't think it's a bad artillery. But for the price and the fact that it is slightly different because it is so damn slow and it is an autoloader, unless you're really desperate to see how artillery plays in Armored Warfare or you're a tank collector, I would probably pass on it. Now, they have had this tank as part of some other deal or a package. If you got it just because you bought a package on the website, well, try it out. Maybe you'll really like it. And that is the Abbot. I actually have a good game to show you now, so stick around if you want to check out how this thing blows things up. I'll see you on the battlefield. And here we are on Operation Tsunami. This is a decent map for artillery. You can shoot the majority of the map, mostly the desert area and some of the dock area, some of the cap circle. So decent. You can get some good shots. I usually come over here to start in most of my artillery just because it gives me a line of fire onto the field, and that's usually where the first few waves start. Here in a second, you're going to immediately see what the arty game is, the little mini game that artillery have to play against each other when there's artillery on both opposing teams. Right there, that red circle is the artillery that fired. He is rendered on the map for me, and as you see, he's fired twice, and the circle got smaller. Now, if you watch my circle, you might want to rewind and watch my circle. The first time I actually fired, the circle was just in the general area of where I was. The second time I fired, it zeroed in much more accurately on my actual location. And if I had fired a third time, it would have zeroed in exactly where I was sitting. So that's what you got to keep in mind when you're playing artillery, is that is exactly how the counter artillery game works. But in fact, I only needed 2 out of my 3 shots to kill the enemy Abbot. I think somebody else hit him. I only did about 287 damage, and you see that I have 585 health. So somebody else got a shot in there in between my 2 shells. Unfortunately, the travel time for most artillery is very slow, anywhere from 250 up to 400, maybe a maximum of 500 meters per second, which sounds like a lot until you're firing something, at 1,000 meters, and it's going to take 4 or 5 seconds for your shell to actually make it all the way across the map. So there is something to be said in this game about having your artillery be kind of mobile and moving up or changing positions to lower the travel time on the shells to be a little bit more useful to your team. Now, in PvP, it's not nearly as necessary, but it does help to be mobile, which, as you can see by the hull traverse here, as I just try to turn around to reposition, this just doesn't have any kind of mobility to it whatsoever. It's just very slow turning turret, very slow turning hull. And I thought, the yellow tank that just spawned there was a mini boss, and I thought I was going to have to help my team, but no. He ended up killing our leopard. I tried to reposition real quick to assist, and he got blown up before I could even get into position. The travel arc is not anywhere close to the same travel arc that some of the artillery have in World of Tanks. It's actually kind of like a shallow hill more than a launch it up into the air and have it travel straight down on top of a tank. So even these little bit of hills here, you can see, will block my shot. Here in a second you'll see my reticle actually turns red. Just because he's over just a little bit of a hill, my shell arc is so bad that it won't go over even that kind of a little bit of a hill to hit him. So you have to be careful. The higher tier artillery do have slightly better shot arcs, but nowhere close to, say, the ones in World of Tanks. Like the Conqueror gun carriage, for example, that has a very high gun arc. I go ahead and reposition my reticle here. There's usually at least 1 or 2 enemy tanks sitting somewhere near the cap circle, and there he is. I wanted to make sure I was pre-aimed so I could do as much damage as I could to help my team. And since this is PvE, you need to have a good team that realizes they have artillery. I've been on a lot of teams, even in the high tier RD that I play, that they just rush in head first and get killed when they have artillery support. Even though I am not necessarily a damage dealer, I can damage wreck tanks as far as modules and crew, and doing that just eliminates the effectiveness of every enemy tank. And as somebody was calling for help, trying to tell the Object 430 to go get one of the objectives, I kind of moved my sight down to look at him, and it almost looks like he's botting. It's either that or the guy or girl is just drunk. I was recording this over the New Year's holidays, so it's possible that they're just wandering around, but they do eventually get the hint and move up and take the objective. You want to get your secondary objectives, by the way. They do give you a very big boost to your reputation and your credits for getting all of your objectives on all of these maps, regardless of what it is. They've actually made getting some of the secondaries a little bit easier on some of the maps, which is also another plus. Unfortunately, this is not a very hard map. Tier 3 can only do a medium mission, so you're kind of stuck down here at a less than difficult sort of difficulty. If you're used to playing hard mode, you might be a little bit disappointed. But as you can see, the overall aim time and shell travel time on this tank is not bad. You see how accurate it is as well. I mean, I can zero in right on the rear end of him. That was actually at actual penetration there, and I did full damage. And as you can see, the yellow that's popping up every time I hit these tanks, that is the module damage I'm doing. I'm either wrecking them completely or damaging them to the point where they need to be repaired. Taking out an enemy gun, you can't fire. If your gun's damaged, you're not going to fire, and their accuracy is going to be reduced. If you blow their tracks off, they're obviously not going to be able to move. If you hit them in the fuel tanks, you have a very high chance to catch them on fire the next time you hit them there. So there's a lot of advantages to having artillery dropping big HE shells on people. But this is kind of an ideal situation. I'm far enough back to where I can't get spotted, and the enemy aren't focusing on me. If they did spot me, I would be dead in basically 2 shots, and I don't have the mobility to get out of danger. My team, for some reason, was scared to death of that T-64, so there's a good reason. He is a tier 4. Most of my team are tier 3s, so, and he has pretty much the first real armor of the Russian line of tanks. So he's kind of a tough target, but if I can hit him in the side, you saw I could wreck him pretty well. Sheridan just sitting perfectly still. He doesn't have anything to shoot at or hasn't spotted somebody to shoot at, so he just kind of hangs out and lets me fire. Too bad I wasn't fully reloaded there, or I probably could have took him out. Another artillery spawns, but boy did he spawn in the wrong part of town, because he got instantly gibbed. The team is just kind of moving up. Now they haven't actually gone into the cap circle yet. I start to type here that there's going to be more enemies spawn out along the 4 and the 5 line out in the field. They have changed this map to where once you get into the cap circle, stuff starts to spawn out there, and I don't think it generally stops. It just keeps spawning and keeps spawning. Now, if your DPS on your tanks is high enough and you can kill them as they spawn, I do think eventually the tanks do stop spawning, but at these lower tiers where everybody's kind of on low health and they don't have that much damage going around, you kind of have to set up a little bit of a perimeter and leave some people in the cap circle while other people go out to kind of hold the rest of the enemies off. I warned them about that. They went ahead and sat in the cap circle. That generally spawns the final waves. And as you can see, it's helping me do as much as I can. I either get one shot or sometimes two shells into a target, and that gets them low enough to where the rest of my team can actually one-shot pretty much anything that comes around. M41 spawned. Takes a big hit there, but I went ahead and launched a shell just so he'd run into it. You can see the amount of module damage I ended up doing to him, though. It's devastating. I start to call for help here. I wasn't quite sure immediately what I was shooting at. Looks like an M60. But he's so far out in the field, and my team is all behind cover. They never get out there. I actually, as you notice, I did not get spotted there. So he didn't even know where he was getting hit from, and he had low enough health that my 3 shots could actually kill him. They decide that they don't want the extra damage from killing the rest of the spawns, and they just sit in the cap circle and cap out. I would suggest capping out if you are in danger, if you're down to your last couple of tanks. Definitely want to do that. Otherwise, it's probably better if you have the time to stick around and get a little extra damage. That damage goes a long way in getting you more credits and reputation. As you saw, I did pretty good. I actually came in 3rd on damage, which is surprising since I am playing artillery. I didn't take any hits, so I didn't mitigate any damage. 1,600 or so, looks like reputation, 44,000 credits. It's not a huge money maker. Unfortunately, that's just what it would normally make. That wasn't multiplied by 3 or anything for the daily. I'd already done the daily, trying to get a good replay for you all. And that's kind of what you're going to expect on an average game. But overall, as I mentioned before, I don't think it's worth your gold unless you're a tank collector or you're just really desperate to try out the artillery. I think artillery in Armored Warfare is very fun to play. It's much more interesting in PvE and in PvP because you do have the counter arty mechanics. You have smoke shells, which at this point I had failed to load, by the way, or I would have shown those off for you. And you get illumination rounds later on, and all of that supports your team in ways that the artillery in World of Tanks can never do. Damage is average per shot. It's not a damage dealer, but it can really wreck other tanks because of the HE damage, because of the module damage, because of the killing of the crew. It's just a weakening of the enemy that becomes more and more useful as the game goes on. You're probably not going to have those type of arty games in this tank where you're the last one alive against 3 or 4 people because you just don't have the speed to re-engage multiple targets or run away, and you definitely don't do the damage per shot to whittle down any kind of a heavy armored target if they were coming for you. I'm not saying it won't happen later on, but if you're a tank collector, you really enjoy the artillery style of gameplay, pick it up. Otherwise, I would go ahead and pass, or if you see a really good deal as part of a package, yeah, go for it. Anyway, that is the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you got some useful information out of it, please press that like button down below. I appreciate it. If you want, you can click down here at the bottom of your screen to subscribe to get further updates on new videos on other premium tanks and other tanks in general as I put them up. I appreciate all of your support, and I'll talk to you next time.